Okay, I mean, so I joke about like how I would vote for Satan to stop Donald Trump. There probably is a line. I've yet not found it yet of like what like more.
Take it there. Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Electricity, 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 electricity. You know.
All right, so Contrapoints talked to Brianna Joy Gray on her Bad Faith podcast, and Contrapoints has been getting a lot of shit lately for comments that she's made on Reddit and Twitter, and also a recent interview that I covered with Joshua Citarella, where she's essentially saying that she's always been more liberal leaning and kind of flirted with left politics, but doesn't really agree with the like pushing the Democratic Party super hard style approach to politics, and seems generally annoyed with anybody who's doing that. Now, after this appearance on her podcast, it kind of spiraled on Twitter a little bit. Natalie got mad, said that Brianna clipped what she was saying dishonestly, and then kind of made a thread about how she, went on the Bad Faith podcast. People told her not to, but she did anyway. And then she thought Brianna was very nice and friendly, but then she posted these dunk clips. And then she blamed her producer. But then, it turns out that the dunk was actually the title of the video. It was like, genocide is too far left for the Democratic Party. That was one of the moments of this debate, and Contrapoints insists that that was an unfair way of framing it. So that, so far, I think was where things were left. A couple threads from both of them, some responses back and forth. Seems like maybe they DM'd after this, because not a whiff of any more engagement about it. So we'll see. I'm just going to go through this conversation. And I also want to say she starts off by saying a quote that is no doubt going to get some mileage, where Brianna Joy Gray says the genocide in reference to the Democrats, and Contrapoint says genocide allegations. What she's referring to there is if you spoke in favor of Kamala Harris in 2024 at all, people would essentially accuse you of genocide. And Natalie is saying that she feels that she gets accused of genocide or genocide apology if she even says people should vote for Kamala Harris. So that's what she's saying. She's not saying genocide allegations against the Democratic Party, even though people are definitely going to run with that one. So anyway, here's some clips.
Like, my experience is that in 2024, it was very difficult to advocate for Kamala Harris in public with a leftist audience because of the extreme push. The genocide allegations, yes, that you would then be accused of. Like, I feel like I guess I don't see voting as like a symbolic expression of my like virtuous stance on any particular issue, so much as I do like a consequentialist calculation about like what is the actual effect of this, and the actual effect of electing Donald Trump has been disastrous.
Yes, and the actual effect of voting blue no matter who means that we get more right-wing presidents every time, both on the Democratic side and on the Republican side. I mean, is there anything that Democrats would do that you would say, if Donald Trump, if the 2016 version of Donald Trump were running against the 2024 Donald Trump on the Democratic ticket, would you say that we should vote for 2016 Donald Trump because his first term was better than his second term?
Okay, I mean, so I joke about like how I would vote for Satan to stop Donald Trump. There probably is a line. I've yet not found it yet of like what like moral depth to which I would stoop to stop Donald Trump.
So what does that mean? I mean, let me maybe ask it this way, Natalie. How much do you think that donor influence and corporate interests are determining the policies of the Democratic Party?
Well, they certainly have some effect. I think I maybe don't think they have quite the level of effect that you do, because yes, they have some effect, but they also, like, at the end of the day, do still need to get elected, right? So I don't think there's an infinite capacity for corporate influence. Like, there's a limit to how far you can push it where people will stop supporting you.
This is kind of my point, that we saw that limit with Gaza and they didn't care.
I mean, you don't even support Kamala Harris during the election. It's not like you say like okay, well, we'll get her elected and then we criticize. It's that when you're not even you don't even want to get her elected, then
because I have so much
that's where I see the criticism as being this like critiquing power thing.
Okay,
because it's like you don't. Yeah. You're not.
Let's talk about power. Let's talk about leverage.
Okay.
Do I have more leverage against Kamala Harris before she's elected or once she's president for 4 years?
Well, in the sense, I mean, I see what you're saying, like as like a protest voter threat, but I don't know. Do the Democrats take that threat seriously, or is it like is it tendency to instead? Because I feel like
this is where I keep getting back to.
I feel like a lot of Democrats feel that the protest voters are sort of unwinnable, are sort of like never happy, right? Whereas there are like centrist median voters that are more winnable, right? And that's, I think,
how has that been panning out?
And it tends to be the reaction to losing an election.
And right? How is that panning out? Who are these centrist voters?
Well, but so you seem to think that the solution to this is to like for if the Democrats pivot to the far left, that there's this like available
the far left
base. Well, by
is
Democratic
not supporting
Party
a genocide as far left
by Democratic Party standards.
Well, isn't that quite the admission?
Well,
isn't that quite the admission that we have a far right Democratic Party if something like ending a genocide is considered to be far left?
Well, I don't think necessarily that particular issue, but so
Medicare for all, raising the minimum wage.
I don't know. To be clear, I don't necessarily think any of that is far left, right? But like,
it's populist. It's centrist politics.
But your position seems to be that like there's this sort of like available untapped voter base that will manifest if the Democrats run on these issues. But why doesn't that voter base manifest in the primaries, I guess is my question.
Well, you refuse to acknowledge the riggedness of the primaries.
Yeah.
You refuse to acknowledge, so I don't know what to tell you.
That the primaries are rigged, but I just
it's not my position. It's the people who rigged the primaries position. They were openly admitting it at this point, Natalie.
I feel the argument that the primaries are rigged is like, I feel like the evidence does not rise to the level where I feel like rigged is an appropriate description for what happened. If it's like Kamala Harris's fault that she lost in 2024, then isn't it also kind of Bernie Sanders' fault that he lost in 2020?
What do you mean? How do you mean?
Well, by failing to generate the energy or to
well, yes, but here's the problem. Here's the problem.
Campaign in South Carolina or whatever we think is the condition that Bernie would have to meet to win.
The problem of how to overcome the media, and I don't want to overstate. I really want to say it was like $70 million worth of earned media that came out of Biden's South Carolina win. Like, Bernie fundraised everybody in the race, but there's only so much you can do about the entire media infrastructure hailing Joe Biden as the king of the blacks and the ultimate winner of the election after winning one southern state that's a red state.
Yeah, so that clip there where Brianna says, well, isn't that the admission that Democratic Party is so far right that ending a genocide is a far left position? That's the one that Contrapoints is saying got clipped out of context and was used as a dunk, and then Brianna Joy Gray said that was my producer who did it. Contrapoint said, own up to what gets posted on your channel, and that was the title of the video itself. So she's essentially saying, okay, me going and trying to have this honest conversation with this person, which was a decent conversation, essentially got used for dunks. And I think she's being a little sensitive because she's right. Like, it did get used for that, and she, seized on this idea of like, oh, it's dishonest framing. And I only think that's sort of true. She was associating this idea of capitulating on the issue of genocide as pivoting to the far left. And really the reason that perception is there is because the far left is the one that was advocating consistently against this genocide, even going back to the uncommitted movement. So that's the blind spot for liberals on this, is that there always was this faction saying we're not going to vote for the Democrats if they're going to continue supporting this. The Democrats just didn't want to believe that. And while that faction alone is not quite enough to make the difference of the election, it certainly suggests that if the Democrats had been more bold on those positions that factions like that were demanding, then they would have had more excitement and probably would have pulled closer to the type of numbers that the Democrats pulled in 2020, which is really what Brianna Joy Gray is arguing for here, is that that's who they should be going to get, is those voters that showed up for Joe Biden but not for Kamala Harris, and that's objectively true. Now, Brianna Joy Gray goes back and forth on her positions a little bit. I think she's good rhetorically. Sometimes she makes more sense than others, and ultimately I don't agree with the solutions that she lands on, but I agree with a lot of the criticisms. Her strategy is interesting. I mean, I think that people are coming more and more around to her way of thinking. That's really just because the Green Party successfully capitalized on that issue of Gaza and tried to differentiate themselves on that, and so they won over some voters. So when it comes to what she's trying to do, she's trying to essentially carve out a certain portion of the electorate that says we vote based on these issues, based on genocide, based on Medicare for all, etc., climate change. And so the only way to incentivize the Democratic Party or anybody else to do that is to actually be able to leave them. So I don't know that I believe that Brianna Joy Gray believes some of the things that she says about how the Democrats Democratic Party is never reformable. And that's where I think that she can be a little tongue-in-cheek in her approach. I think basically her thinking is that there won't be an incentive for any party to actually do things like Medicare for all, or for the Democratic Party to actually move in that direction, unless there are Democratic voters or people in that voter base that will legitimately just not vote for Democrats or abstain, or will participate in the election for the Green Party. So they are voters, but they're just refusing to vote for Democrats. And so I think that's basically her strategy. And in her mind, it only works if there's a real commitment to only voting for a Green Party. That being said, doesn't mean that if there was a more progressive candidate in 2028 on the Democratic side that she wouldn't pull the same game of saying Democratic Party can't be reformed, etc. But at the moment, I think there's a little bit more of a favorable view of this type of perspective, because there were more people that abstained from voting for Kamala Harris, or at least weren't very enthusiastic about it. And I don't think that many people share this view that it's the voters' fault. There are some people out there, loyal liberal voters and Democratic voters are going to come to this conclusion that people should have just shut up and voted for Kamala Harris. But ultimately, I think there's a lot of people out there, even ones who did vote for Kamala and wanted her to win, that recognized that this genocide thing was an issue, and Kamala Harris, was viewed as having blood on her hands, and so she needed to do more about it. It's really not that complicated, and that's the point that Brianna Joy Gray is making over and over again here, is that they just simply ignored that. And I think the underlying point here is that Democrats will do things that please their donors, even when it flies directly in the face of what voters want. And they make the calculation that they can still win elections anyway. That's essentially what the argument is. And so my problem with Brianna Joy Gray's argument is that I don't think there's really a solution there when it comes to her strategy. She is effective at pointing this stuff out, and I think is being proven right with time as of right now. But ultimately, I think that if you ignore the momentum, the left momentum in the Democratic Party right now, because you've come to the conclusion that it will never change, I think that's a little bit stubborn in a way that kind of ignores the fact that politics changes whether you're looking at it or not. And the issue of money in politics is not something that the Green Party is going to escape. It's something you have to fight in no matter what the apparatus is. And you're actually weakening yourself by wanting to build a party with less infrastructure. It at very least is going to take much more time before you're politically viable at all. Whereas if there are candidates right now in the Democratic Party that are making demands like Medicare for all, divestment from Israel, and more, then that's promising in terms of not just what the establishment of the party is taking note that people want, but what is becoming popular enough to win in the party. So I have some thoughts in terms of what it can actually look like to break through this pattern and perhaps reclaim not only like a rebellious culture on the left, but one that's actually politically effective and politically viable. But I'll get to that at the end. Real quick, here is Contrapoints and Brianna Joy Gray discussing anti-Semitism and whether people like Tucker Carlson are to be trusted.
Do you not worry that by upholding like Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens, for example, as these exemplars of like anti-Zionist, being anti-Zionist champions, by allowing people on the far right to take that, by giving them the credit of that rule, don't you worry that this has a potential to kind of blur the leftist claim to anti-Zionism with a right-wing anti-Semitism?
You said it right the first time. First you said allowing, and then you said giving credit for. So let's go back to allowing. I'm not giving credit for anything. I'm ringing the warning bells loud that the Democrats are allowing, which is the word you used the first time, which is correct. They are allowing Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens to be the best anti-Zionist voices and the most high platform anti-Zionist voices in the country. Because we have to be willing to talk about Zionists controlling the media when they do. When the Ellisons buy TikTok and Nexstar and Paramount and all of these things, and explicitly say they're doing so because they want a Zionist point of view, and they hire Barry Weiss with no qualifications to do Zionist control at CBS. When I'm fired from my media job at The Hill explicitly because I've been fighting for, not explicitly because they never said anything explicitly, but after having fought for 6 months to do any coverage of Israel, despite the fact that the Israel coverage was critical Israel coverage was driving our views and making the company money, we have to be able to talk about the way that Zionist media is out of step with popular opinion and, frankly, the truth.
So I think that it is possible. So look, it is possible that I'm wrong, right? It's possible that I'm overreacting to this risk. And it is possible that people like Tucker Carlson will, in fact, be disciplined anti-Zionists who are savvy about not allowing their anti-Zionism to metastasize into some kind of protocols of the elders of Zion type nonsense. If that's the case, I will look stupid. However, I'm willing to take that risk because I think that the odds of this metastasizing into some kind of protocols of the elders of Zion nonsense are fairly high.
I would be clear. My disagreement is not that there's not risk about where Tucker's going to take this, but that we cannot. If we start saying, oh my God, every time someone talks about Zionist media influence, that's Elder of Zion stuff, well, then the only person who's going to be taken seriously, the only person who's going to talk about the true thing of Zionist media influence is going to be Tucker Carlson.
I'm coming to feel more strongly about that, actually, as others are becoming more convinced that he, might have honest intentions. I'm genuinely concerned about the other things that he says and how that factors in. But I think that Brianna Joy Gray is correct when she says that if we don't meet the moment in talking about anti-Zionism and making the case for that people feel intuitively and doing it in a way that is able to distinguish it from anti-Semitism, then people like Tucker Carlson are going to dominate that space. Contrapoints is a little bit more like hand-wringing about the idea of acknowledging ever that somebody like Tucker Carlson is right, which I do think some people are getting way too comfortable with. And the truth about Tucker Carlson is that he is very much still Christian nationalist, not just to kind of an intimidating or scary degree, but to a delusional degree. And so what that means to me is that he will take the spiritual warfare aspect of these politics very far. And as much as he talks about populism or whatever, most of what I hear him talk about in terms of policy comes back to this like spiritual idea. And I think Tucker Carlson is more interested in seizing what he views as an opening to talk about what the soul of America is, the sole purpose of America, in a moment where that's being neglected. I think that that's his project, and that is a distinctly fascist motivation. And if you listen to the other things he's saying, aside from his apt criticism of Israel, that's the type of case he's building, is this kind of Christian nationalist spiritualism. And I mean, that is the exact ingredient that has led to fascism in the past. So, it's not wrong to acknowledge that he's right on the issue of Israel. It's also not wrong to say that clearly his intentions are not the same as left critics of him, and it's more important to take that ground from him than it is to throw an arm around him. And I've been thinking lately about the splintering on the left and how it's still kind of an ongoing process, even something like this, like the need to, distinguish Contrapoints from Brianna Joy Gray, even though their positions are quite different. And Brianna Joy Gray is not even like a Democratic Party voter. But at the same time, they agree on so many positions. But there's this need, this focus on an internal logic of who's on the team, who's not on the team, what kind of leftist this person is, what kind of liberal they are. And I'm not even really interested in pushing back on that because I think it's a natural process that's happening. And it has to do with personality, what people feel inclined to do. And so I guess I'm wondering how that can be put to a little bit better use. And I think that the fact that people on the left are creative in their thinking and want to distinguish themselves and one another can actually be a good thing. And even this tendency to split off into different political groups that sort of address your specific concerns or whatever, I think can actually be politically viable. The thing that would glue that together is a specific focus on issues where you'll say, I'm willing to use my political leverage as a cudgel to advocate for this specific issue, but also if somebody adopts that issue, I will throw my support behind them. Medicare for all, divestment from Israel, gettable asks that multiple different radical groups can attach themselves to on their own, right? And it has to be an organic process of people genuinely being motivated towards those things, but also feeling like their own individual political project can be a part of that. And so it allows people to have their kind of individual identity within a tapestry that can actually be used to leverage for political change. Because if there's enough people taking part in that type of cultural exchange, where you have your own sort of political identity and you are advocating meaningfully for change that people do agree on, like healthcare, etc., and be genuinely willing to put their political leverage towards that end, whether it means voting for the Democratic Party or the Green Party or whatever else might be necessary on a somewhat coordinated basis, then people on the left can start, putting themselves to a little bit of better use while still being able to keep their individualities and their tribalisms. Because if we don't find a way to coordinate that and make it a little bit more politically useful, then we're all just wasting each other's time.